Good afternoon and welcome to another Telmix broadcast. You're watching us again. As you know, we run these every month and we have some great discussions all about how to enrich the lives of our consultants and to give you some industry insight on what's happening in the world of independent consulting and independent talent. So welcome if you're joining us from further afield or if you're close by, wherever you are in the world. We do hope that today's session is going to be great and give you a lot of advice and tips on how to improve and really maximize your career as an independent worker even more so. My name is Katie Roberts, as you probably are aware, and today's session, as always, will be recorded and will be available on our YouTube channel and also via our resources page on our website. So do make sure that you, if you do miss it or you want to watch it again, you do bookmark the page and you come back and have another look at it again later. If you want to join the conversation, feel free to do so via Twitter. Just follow our handle, we are Telmix, and send any questions you may have to any of our guests or myself throughout the half an hour today. So today we're talking about a topic which I know is very close to a lot of our independent consultants' hearts, and that is mastering the art of effectively using the peaks and troughs that occur in an independent consulting career and making them work for you. So as always, I don't want to do any of the talking. I have two very, very proficient, seasoned consultants on the panel with me today who know all about that and have some amazing insight to share. So without further ado, I just wanted to introduce them and we'll let them introduce themselves. So we've got Nigel Peckham. Nigel is an expert in consulting, especially when it comes to the retail industry and working in all over the world. Nigel, you've worked. So just in 20 seconds, you want to just tell us a little bit more about you and some of the things you've done.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon. Yes, I've traveled extensively from Australia through the Middle East, South Africa, some of Europe, and a lot of time in the UK, with a background very much in large department stores, grocery, convenience stores, and in the discount sector. So very much different formats of retail, but right across the piece from supply chain through to buying and through into the front end in the retail stores. So that's really my background.
Excellent. Thanks, Nigel. I'm sure you're going to have some great insight to share. We've also got Bob. Bob, all the way from the US. And again, thank you so much and happy Independence Day. And thank you for sharing your time with us today. I know it's a very special day for you. Bob is also a seasoned management consultant and currently a part-time lecturer at DeMoore McKim School of Business with Northeastern University. So, Bob, in a nutshell, tell us a little bit more about yourself and some of your history.
Well, thank you, Katie. I really appreciate the time to be with all of you today. I've been a management consultant for about 20 odd years, mostly working in healthcare and also in the nonprofit world. I'm developing, since I've been teaching in the business school, I've been developing expertise working with the millennial generation. So that's quite a challenge as well. A little bit like Nigel, I've worked all around the world, everywhere from Australia to the UK to Bolivia and South America. And today I'm talking to you.
Awesome. Well, it's good to have you. So I want to jump straight in because I know we've got lots to talk about. And Nigel, I just wanted to start with you for a second. As I said, you're a seasoned independent consultant and you have extensive experience in the retail industry. So having come from a world of retail and now working independently and on your own, tell me a little bit more about how you found the process of transitioning from one world as it is to the other. What were some of the new normals that you had to learn and adapt to as a now independent consultant?
I think the biggest thing was that the phone stopped ringing. You know, when you're in an employed role and on the board of a major company, the phone doesn't stop, and then all of a sudden it does, and you had to really get used to being proactive and getting out there and marketing yourself. And certainly, that was the biggest change that I had to go through. And I think also network building. I'd really never had to go out and find people. They'd always come to me. I'd always been on the employed side. So retail, obviously, then attracts a lot of people into you. And that was the biggest change I think I had to do, was get used to the fact that it was really self-starting, which is not a problem, but actually building a network, building the contacts, and maintaining that communication all the time with everybody. And I certainly think that that's a valuable lesson for anybody coming in, using the likes of LinkedIn, writing blogs on there, making sure that you keep yourself current, and also putting out, regular updates so that, you're just feeding across and people are picking things up across LinkedIn as your network builds.
And Nigel, just on that for a second, if I can just embellish a little bit more, was that something that you expected, that the phone stopped ringing, or did you kind of know that would happen and prepare yourself for that?
you kind of know it's going to happen, but it's quite a shock to the system because you're conditioned to 7 a.m. in the morning till maybe 9 at night, the phone is going to ring, and suddenly it doesn't ring. And that's quite a change. And that's the one thing I think people have got to get used to. It sounds great when you're in the employed world and the phone never stops. But suddenly when it does, it can be a little bit disturbing. And, you've got to get out there and you've got to be doing the opposite end of that. You're phoning people. And certainly for me, that was a new experience because I'd never had to go out and not so much cold call, but actually build relationships and make those first contacts. And that certainly was a big change for me.
And Bob, I mean, you and I have chatted before as well. In fact, for our viewers, we did an earlier profile piece on Bob and his career as well. And Bob, in our earlier conversations, you've told me about how independent consulting was almost ingrained in your upbringing through your mother and particularly your father's professions, which I still find fascinating. In just a minute or two, tell us a little bit more about that and how your background and your upbringing enabled you to be the consultant that you are today.
Well, Katie, half my, as we talked about, half my family were teachers, and my mother was the most, or generationally the closest to me, and my father actually was a spy during World War II. So that's a story I told you. But even farther back, I had ancestors who were, would do things like work in the Foreign Service of the United States, and who would travel independently around the world. Even back when they weren't called consultants back then, but they more or less did that. And so it was something that when I realized, when I wanted to become a consultant, people in my family everywhere from grandparents and parents said, oh, your so-and-so did this. And so it's sort of genetically wired in me, I guess it was just to say. And so it's also something I was comfortable with. So to echo what Nigel was saying, you have to be, but when you do make that step to become a consultant, you have to realize you're right, it's on you. It's not, the phone doesn't ring in the same way, and you have to ensure that. But one of the things I think you have to be very comfortable with is risk. And so I guess, in my background, I became comfortable with risk. And I would also say you have to be comfortable with ambiguity, because when you don't know where your next gig is going to come from, you have to be okay with that. And, when you're employed, well, you're going to get a paycheck either once a month or twice a month, however you were being paid. It's different when you are a consultant. It's not on the same schedule, and you're managing that. And it's a whole different ballgame then.
I mean, you mentioned something there, being comfortable with ambiguity. That's something I hear consistently. You have to be okay to not be okay, or to kind of have to forge your way, or to think on your feet and make ideas, or come up with ideas and make plans as you go along. Nigel, so if we talk about this independent way of working specifically, retail is everywhere and it's big business. So surely in your career thus far, you've had great opportunity to work on some amazing projects as an independent consultant. And when things are busy in the retail world, they're usually all hands on deck. I mean, it's something I'm sure that you can attest to as well. So tell us a little bit more about some of the techniques that you've used as an independent consultant to be able to multitask, balance stakeholder interests, get the job done, get everything, make sure everything is done when things are really busy and when things are at a high, really.
It's an interesting point you make there, and I'm going to come back to one of Bob's as well. But actually, as an independent consultant, generally you're busier when it's not going well. Because when things are going well, everybody says it's fine, we're doing a great job, we don't need any help. And then they scratch around when it doesn't go quite so well. So I'd actually say that in the retail world, it actually almost works on the opposite way. That actually generally when business is flying, they don't worry about either doing better or investigating. But actually, you generally find you do better in a downturn. So just to tweak that slightly that's only on a personal experience basis.
That's really
other aspects of retail. Maybe it is better on the good times. But I'm generally an investigative consultant. I'm going in to analyze either why it isn't working or how we can make it better. So that generally is where I fit in. Or I'm in startups. So I'm generally in startup businesses, and I'm just with Talmix at the moment. My next project is going to be a startup in the Middle East. So very much in those ways. But what you can do as a consultant is ensure that you're aware of current trends. Very important to be involved with industry, elements of anything that you're particularly specializing in. A lot of work has gone on with digital and webs and online and e-commerce and multi-channel, all the different aspects people call it. I just think of it as a 21st retail environment. We're just interacting with customers the same as we've always done. and not to give it a different name. You know, we're dealing with them on a telephone, that they happen to be sitting on a train or a bus ordering goods, just the same as they're stood in front of me. So really, it's just a customer interaction, and we're doing it through a digital channel rather than face to face. But the things that we need to do on a retail side is deliver consistently, make sure the customer expectation is met, and ensure that the communication is clear for them if something doesn't work out as they wanted. So I think as a consultant, if you've worked in the field that you're consulting in and you've got experience, being a consultant puts you into a wider spectrum. And what I've done is worked with and interacted with so many more companies and individuals than I would ever have done in a retail career if I'd stayed in one company for 25 years. One of the things I most enjoy is meeting people and going to different cultures. We have the opportunity to travel as well, but it's really about, you know, seeing how things go, and retesting yourself and challenging yourself. And Bob talks about ambiguity and things like that. You know, for me, I enjoy the challenge of going into a new environment and actually seeing that what I have learned is core. You know, my core disciplines stand firm in whatever environment I put them in, because it's tested. And 30 years in retail, you know, I've been there and done it and seen it, and we can stand in any retail business and have an honest conversation.
I suppose that's the challenge as independent consultants, is that whole, especially for new consultants who have left a full-time employment environment where you keep yourself relevant, you keep yourself up to date on industry trends, because you are surrounded by people who also share that passion. And now you're on your own. It's really, you know, I think a lot of people underestimate the amount of effort they need to put in to keep themselves current, to keep themselves up to speed, you know, on what's happening in order to keep delivering new value.
I think you've actually got to keep yourself forward rather than current. You've actually got to be looking at the trends, trying to forecast and try to see where things are going. Whatever industry you're in, because, you know, current today is where we are, but that's probably not what people are going to ask you about. They're going to ask you what's going to happen. And, you know, that's really one thing I would say to people. You need to be forward looking, making sure you've got inputs from around the world. And it is about building your network. And it's not a vertical network, it's a broad network. People from different aspects, whether that be in a marketing field, whether that be in human resources, whether that be in IT resourcing or something. You know, if you've got connections in those worlds, keep them strong, because by staying very, very narrow, you limit the opportunities. I've done work in buying, I've done work in facilities management, right the way across from convenience stores to discount retail. So the broader you can have a base, you know, the more opportunities are going to come.
Yeah, I suppose if you stay current, tomorrow you're too late. Tomorrow you're in the past.
Well, so, the current's where we are. People are looking to you for solutions, ideas, objectives for the future. And so I always just think it's relevant that people keep it in that mind.
Absolutely. And Bob, I see you nodding as well. From your point of view, what would you say is a winning strategy to successfully manage the busy times?
Well, I totally agree with what Nigel is saying, and I'd even encourage him. You know, one of the challenges when you have some project that just is eating your life just because it's so demanding, and Nigel's also right, when things aren't going well is often when I enter a situation and everybody's in crisis, and so you have to work to get them to calm down and to be focused and where they're going and so on, and you have to be sure to take care of yourself. And so one of the things I make sure it sounds trite or a cliche, but you literally have to make sure you eat right and exercise and get sleep and all those things, because you know the demands on you can be very great, and so you have to take care of yourself. The other thing I always say to people is try to even put into your calendar of a certain number of hours a week where you do things to, you know, like for example, I make sure that I read constantly, at least a half hour to an hour a day, about things, you know, again, as Nigel was saying, about the trends in my industry and where I'm looking at, you know, ahead, you know, 3, 5, 7 years down the road, because you know what Nigel said is correct. You know that your clients are looking for you to, you know, be ahead of the game as much as possible. And you know what worked 10 years ago, 5 years ago, even 3 years ago has changed, and so we have to constantly look ahead. You know, and so one of the things I always do is try to find people who are smarter than I am in the fields that I work in, and make sure I read them and listen to podcasts and do that all this stuff and constantly renew myself, because if I don't, the herd will quickly pass me by.
Yep. So if we Bob, if we just stay with you for a sec. So if we look at consultants who are working on a great project and it's a project that just kind of keeps rolling, etc., what would your advice be for those consultants who sometimes perhaps even risk becoming a bit complacent during a smooth running project, or something that, you know, may seem too good to be true that just carries on indefinitely, to protect them from a nasty awakening, as it were?
Well, the easy answer to that is don't get comfortable. I do a lot of coaching of other consultants, and that's one of the things I'd say is I constantly play the devil's advocate and say, what if this happens? So you need to do those things, you know, taking care of yourself as a consultant, make sure that you're putting X amount of your money away, doing all those other things to, you know, when you're making a lot of money, that's great, but you know, the lean times can come, especially if you're having the great project and it's all encompassing and it's comfortable. Well, when it stops, what are you going to do? And certainly we have technology. I mean, Talmex is a great place. You know, we all look. LinkedIn is another great place. They're all great places to look for the next gig, but there's no guarantees ever. And that's one of the things to realize in that is that, you know, it's a fascinating world to be a consultant, and there are no guarantees.
And Nigel, anything to add to what Bob has just mentioned?
No, I think the one thing I would comment on, and you're aware of it, is being too focused on a particular project for the future. I've certainly, and for Bob's information, I've over-focused on a project in the Middle East, and it's dragged on for 4 months before it started, and definitely got a little bit too personal with it, too involved, and bypassed other things in order to stay focused on this one. So I would say to any consultants, always keep yourself, you know, multiple options moving forward, but don't get too over target focused on one thing. And certainly been guilty of that recently. So that's something I've had to personally discipline myself and say, put a time limit on things. If they don't reach a certain time, you've got to move on and get on to something else. Otherwise, before you know it, 3 months have gone by and you've earned nothing. And
you've missed opportunity that could have taken
completely. Yes.
So Nigel, staying with you. So when we look at the inverse of the busy times, I mean, you've already shared a little bit of insight in terms of what you do, or what consultants should do when things get quiet, and, you know, some of the best practices. But when we look at the quiet time specifically between projects, what have you learned that has enabled you to successfully manage those quiet downtimes? You know, to allow you to prepare for the next best thing. Some of the practicalities of doing that. You know, especially when it comes to things like ensuring you are secure financially, that you are constantly forward thinking, things like that.
I think most importantly for someone coming out of an employed role is looking at qualifications. You know, I came out from the discount sector, moved into consulting through a contact from within the business, and was straight away working, so didn't really have a gap. But 3 years later came back to it and said, I really ought to sit down and do some project management qualifications. And I've still to actually take that to the next level and finish it off. I've started it. But it's that sort of thing in the downtime, looking at relevant qualification, looking at particular upskilling. You may have something you're not very good at, or something that you need. It would always be useful to say to people, I can do that now. I've got some more skills, or I've got a qualification. For those of us who are coming, you know, out from a non-educational background, etc., I was straight into work from school. You know, you know, going back to studying is quite a jolt, but it's also very exciting and very interesting. So I think qualifications, things that are relevant, making sure that you update your LinkedIn profile even during the busy time. And, you know, it's very important because people are constantly looking at your LinkedIn profile and anywhere else you're putting your information. You've got your own website, updating current projects, things that you're working on. Don't wait for them to finish. Talk about the project you're currently dealing with, if you're able to, obviously, subject to any confidentiality. But talking about things in general terms necessarily than maybe specifics. But just keeping things relevant, because you'll never know what people are looking for when they click on your profile, and they're looking for someone with a project skill that you currently may be working on, and that can be a great lead in for you. And I've certainly had examples of that.
And Bob, thoughts on that?
I echo what Nigel said. I'd also say have people, one of the other things that works for me is like with LinkedIn profiles and things like that, have people you know and respect look at your profile, because we get into you know, focused thinking. We don't see the forest for the trees, and so have other people look at it. You know, I've been fortunate, like with my CV, I've had some of the most excellent people in the world lead all over it and make it better. And you know, you can always improve things, always make them better, always, you know, have them look at things. give you feedback about them. And, you know, that's where one of the important things is take your ego out of it. It's a lot better to have, you know, I've had, as I said, the best people in the world just slam what I've had on my CV, and I've rewritten it, and it's become far better.
And again, I mean, that message of self-promotion and self-marketing as a consultant just comes up again. It comes up again and again and again. And I think, you know, consultants often ask us, well, how do we market ourselves? How do we, you know, and for the sake of our viewers, we've done several articles on our resource pages and a webinar as well about exactly that topic of how do I market myself as an independent consultant. And again, I mean, just in the conversation it comes up, and I suppose it's something that never stops. You never stop doing that, because Bob, something that just occurred to me, you know, you're absolutely right when you say you constantly update your LinkedIn profile, because the world changes, the industry changes, and you have to always change with that. So you may have a great LinkedIn profile today, but, you know, in a month's time, it might be a completely different, you know, differently looking industry, and you need to kind of tweak that. So, so it makes total sense. It's a constant project. Nigel, I wanted to just come over to you for a second. So I suppose as an independent consultant, you quickly learn the art of sleeping with one eye open, so to speak. You're always keeping your eye open for the next opportunity that comes along. So how do you, or in an industry that is so consumer driven and ever changing, which is obviously retail, how do you ensure that you keep yourself relevant, of interest, and in the minds of prospective clients all the time? Tell us a little bit more about the practicalities of how you do that and how you develop your forward thinking prediction, so to speak.
I think it is very much, and Bob touched on that, you're reading all the time. You know, you're making sure that you're picking up, you know, industry. You may be a member of some industry watchdog, or involved with a particular forum, or involved in something, and from that you get feeds. I belong to the North American convenience store group. Now that brings in stuff from the US, but of course that then trends over to Europe, you know, 1 or 2 years later. And I can talk to people about things that I've picked up from the States or from the Far East, and it's relevant and it's important. And it's shifting you know, all the time. As a consultant, people are looking for the forward option. They're not really interested in the history so much. They want to know your experience and what your background is. But beyond that, they're really looking at what you can do for them going forwards. So I think if you have to have a mindset very much on the future, and it is also, you know, you don't want to follow people into a cul-de-sac. There are many, many things that, you know, consultants have said, oh, this is the new thing. Think it through. And, you know, I had an interesting question the other day put to me about a retail business, and I asked them the question, have they strategically looked at cash, whether they will deal with cash in the future, or have they done a piece of work to analyze what if they didn't take cash, and they hadn't done. So that's something for the future, because that I picked up from trending from Japan, where they were looking at businesses that are looking at not handling cash at all. So it's little things like that you can ask a strategic question, and often that leads you in, and then people say to you, well, come and talk to us about this, and it leads in a different direction. You end up doing something completely different, but by asking a fairly intelligent question that they haven't thought of, sometimes they then want you to come and do something else. So keep yourself relevant, forward thinking definitely, and reading and keeping things up to date is really, really vital. And using resources like Talmix. You know, I've currently got 2 live project assignments in progress. Whether one or both will come off, I don't know at this stage, but one is certain, I think, going to happen. And it's having that relationship. You know, people then start contacting you from Talmix and saying, look, we've got a project here, come and talk to us. You know, we thought this might be relevant for you. It's a relationship at the end of the day, like everything else. And, you know, Bob's going to know that better than me. You know, if you've got a good relationship with people in Talmix, they hear of a project and they think, oh, maybe Bob's free. Let's see where he's going. And that's it. And I think, you know, relationship building is absolutely key, both with clients and with agencies.
And I think certainly a lot of that activity does stem from yourself, your drive to look, you know, once you found something that works, you invest the time and the energy into making something work to pursue it, you know. I think, again, going back to the complacency thing, people often just get or are at risk of waiting for things to happen instead of actively going out and seeking opportunity and asking questions and, you know, and trying to improve, whether it's improve their profile or improve the way that they present themselves or how they they behave in an interview, those types of things, you know. And on that point, Bob, when we look at consultants who are potentially new to the industry, or who have just, you know, or new in their consulting journey, or independent journey rather, what advice would you give to them, or to those who are just starting out and who are at the cusp of building their business development plan? I mean, they're sitting there, they may not have a client yet, or they may have one, but they're starting their fresh page, ready. You know, what kind of behavioral actions or activity would you recommend they put in place to kind of get that journey off on a good start?
They have to be sure that they know what their strengths are. What do they do really, really well? And so, because that'll be one of the things they talk to the clients and so on like that. But for example, if they aren't good at business development, then they need to, for example, practice that. It's what Nigel was saying about networking and so on like that. The other thing they have to do is find, if they're not particularly good at it, find people who are and have them talk about them. You know, one of the most powerful things in this industry is word of mouth. Even in this day of technology and everything else, word of mouth is the most powerful thing. It's just what Nigel said. You know, the folks at Talmadge will say, oh, you know, Nigel would be really great for this. We should definitely make sure he applies for this. Well, that's really key. So you want people that you're top of mind, always, the type of stuff. What's the buzz? And it's not necessarily everybody, but there's a niche or a niche, depending on how one says it, of like, who are the people who like are almost your marketing team, unofficially, but who go out and say, wow, Nigel's really great, Katie's really great, Bob is really great, and here's why. And you need to go talk to them. I get, even with all the things of technology nowadays and LinkedIn and how important they are and everything else, I get more from my network, and somebody will text me or email me or call me or whatever and say, Bob, you have to apply for this. You have to try for this. Oh, this was you, and you know, is you. And that's incredibly powerful. And you know, if there's not a buzz, you know, like there needs to be a buzz somewhere in what you're doing. And certainly your own, you need to be the catalyst for what you're doing. You know, you need to be out there and doing things, but why should people talk about you? You know, and you know, what is your brand? It's basically, what is your brand? What is the thing that, you know, like, what are you known for? You know, and those are things like, you know, and there's certain things in consulting that are standard. I mean, Nigel would probably echo these things. You have to be known as doing a good job, being, you know, your integrity is everything. Your reputation is everything. If you're going to do something, make a commitment, you have to follow through. You have to follow through. And if at the same time, we're human beings, we screw up, we make mistakes. If we do, own it immediately. No excuses, own it. You will get so much farther, so much faster by taking responsibility than you will for anything else. And so those are the things I'd say to a new consultant.
You know, I think with the both of you, I think we could easily do another couple of sessions on something like this, because I think you've got so much insight that myself, I'm kind of finding, you know, making frantic notes. It's great, and I'm really appreciative that you both share your insights so freely. Bob, just one last thing, and I think it's more of an, well, appealing to the emotional quotient really of an individual. But what would you suggest, or how, you know, when it comes to keeping your spirits up through the slow times, whether you're just starting out your journey or you find yourself in the middle of projects and it's really quiet and, you know, you've done all these things and you're still not seeing any progress? What advice do you give to people who may find themselves in times like that?
Get out of your own head.
Get out of your own head.
Go do something for somebody else. Even if I've even done things when things were quiet and I couldn't do anything, I found a nonprofit and I did a pro bono project for them, just to keep my skills fresh, just to keep, you know, like this type of thing, because it paid me back multiply. Because I can always say, hey, I did this project. People don't need, you know, we'd all preferably get paid and lots of money, but if you need to, you know, it's kept me current, it kept me learning and growing and developing, and got me out of my own head. And that's one of the biggest things I'd say.
And Nigel, from your side?
I think if you see constantly that you're the bridesmaid when you're putting pitches in and you're finding you're not quite getting that project, find out what the guy or girl who got it had that you didn't, and then go and do something about it. You know, because I found, for example, digital. You know, I didn't have digital retail fore and front in my CV and in my background, and so I went out and did some work in the digital area, as Bob said, not learned, and I went and worked with someone I'd worked with previously, and said to him, look, just show me how digital works and let's talk it through. And then I knitted it into another project, which wasn't part of it, but I made it part of it so that I could then talk about it and had the experience behind it. So if you find you've got a skill missing, or you've got an area of the business that may be new and wasn't necessarily in your role when you were, in the employed role, make sure you grab that and bring it in, because people, that, as I say, it's all about the future, not so much the past. And you've got to make sure that you've got those new skills or new areas of knowledge.
And we have literally a minute left. 30 seconds. Bob, final thoughts that you want to add to some of the things that we've spoken about today. Any final thoughts?
Well, first of all, I wish everybody good luck in what they're doing, because it's a brave and noble venture, I think, becoming a consultant. The other thing with is, I go back to what I said before is know what your strengths are, and find, if you need to learn something, as Nigel would say, find people smarter than you and learn from them, because people will gladly, I've been amazed at the generosity of people giving me advice. I go to them with a question and say, well, gee, how does this work? They'll ask, just ask. It's the biggest thing you can do.
Awesome. Thank you for that. Nigel, final thoughts from you?
Don't be complacent. If you've got a good revenue stream, maybe from a previous employer or a contact, don't rely on that for the future always. Constantly question yourself, what will I do if this ends? What if he moves jobs and goes work somewhere else? What if she, leaves the business and the contact is broken? Always look at what you're going to do. And as I say, complacency is a difficult thing. So make sure you challenge yourself and get out there and do something different. But I wish everybody great success. Talmix is a good resource and certainly something should be visited regularly. But there are plenty of things to do. LinkedIn and Talmix, certainly two things you should focus on.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And thank you very much for the kind words. Right there, we've got our unofficial marketing team already promoting Talmix. So thank you for that. Gentlemen, thank you so much for your time. Really appreciate it again. And thank you for your insights. To our viewers, just a reminder that this happens every month. We have another one, an exciting one coming up in August. So do keep your eye on our social media and on your email inbox. We'll be sending more information about that soon. But there's nothing more to say other than, Bob, have a wonderful 4th of July celebration this afternoon. And Nigel, all the best, as I know you are, starting out on a new project, which is going to take you to other corners of the world. So all the best for that. And to our audience, have a wonderful afternoon further, or morning, wherever you are in the world, and we'll catch up with you in August again. Until then, goodbye and take care.
Cheers.